Hi there. Welcome to Chapter 4 of my series going over every single piece of music in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Chapter 3 was mercifully brief, but Chapter 4 is a lot like the sprawling Chapter 2. We've got a massive new region to explore, mini-games to lose our patience with, detailed multi-level towns to get lost in, and a whole lot of plot development. So it's going to take us several episodes to cover everything, but some of my favorite moments in all of Rebirth are in this chapter, so we are in for a good time. Let's jump in. After an arduous trek through the Mithril Mine, Cloud and Co. face the beaming golden sun descending on the horizon as they finally emerge in the Junon region. A cutscene plays as we step outside, causing Shotaro Shima's Follow the Black Robes track from Chapter 3 to unceremoniously come to a close. As the party spots 7 black-robed individuals, the music starts with some fragile, unsettling strings nearly identical to Yoshinori Nakamura's Mako Poisoning from Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is likely giving away the identity of this track's arranger too. But the piece's moodiness is cast aside as Tifa spots a big condor in the sky, vying for its lunch. Here, fast strings kick in to elevate the accompanying action. The strings and brass sound a bit stiff to me, usually a giveaway that we are dealing with virtual instruments and not live ones, further confirming this likely isn't a Shima piece. And it also helps explain why Shima's Follow the Black Robes from the end of Chapter 3 simply faded out when we left the mine. As opposed to dynamically transitioning to this new cutscene piece, similar to what Shima does when we go from Chapter 2 to Chapter 3. But this time around, we're doing a handoff from one arranger to another, so it's not too surprising there's a clean break in the music. My, perhaps presumptuous, takeaway is that while Rebirth has some very impressive track transitions, those are mostly relegated to transitions between 2 tracks by the same arranger. If we think of some of the transitions we've heard so far, such as On Our Way and Calm, or Midgarstormer, or Elena's boss fight, we seem to be mostly dealing with one arranger at a time, which of course makes sense. To make a massive soundtrack at the near unprecedented scale that is Rebirth's, you would need all of your composers working in tandem, likely off in their own bubbles, working on different parts of the game at the same time. It is probably unrealistic to assume that something like a gameplay to cutscene to gameplay music transition would have multiple arrangers working on the same job together. It's just too much manpower and time commitment for such a brief moment. This sort of broader inter-arranger dynamism is one of the few casualties of having such a massive sound team. Rebirth's musical variety is undoubtedly one of the soundtrack's strongest points, but it is slightly at the expense of its own cohesion. The handoff from one arranger to the next likely isn't going to be as sophisticated and seamless as when you're dealing with just one arranger. A Shima track is not in conversation with a Nakamura track the way it is with another Shima track, or how a Nakamura track connects with another Nakamura track, as we're about to see in a few seconds. Or at least that's typically the result. So something I'll be looking out for in Chapter 4 and beyond is examples of seamless track transitions between 2 tracks by 2 or more separate composers and arrangers arrangers. We have over 60 tracks to cover in Chapter 4, and I've spent several minutes covering the opening seconds of the first track. I gotta channel some of that Chapter 3 energy and hurry the frick up. As the Condor passes, we return to the track's initial, darker, more ominous arrangement style. As the camera pans down to gameplay, the track seamlessly transitions to our next track. Welcome to the Junon region. In the original game, the Junon area was a fairly large part of the game's world map that featured a variety of grasslands, rivers, barren plains, mountains, and even forested areas. As with everything Rebirth, the varied biomes of Junon have gotten a massive glow-up, given the area a very distinct look, completely different from the capital G grasslands we explored in Chapter 2. But it's not just the visuals of the Junon region that got an upgrade. The same is true of the music's identity. In 1997's FF7, the music that plays while you are exploring the Junon area is the same music that plays while exploring just about every other area of the world map. The game has basically one track that plays regardless of where you are on the world map. It's the Final Fantasy VII main theme, which we covered in detail when we first stepped outside of Calm 5 episodes ago. Considering the amount of time you spend in Rebirth's equivalent of the world map, they made the right call by providing not just many varieties of the Final Fantasy VII main theme, but also new compositions to further differentiate the various field regions of the game. In Chapter 2, we covered 2 arrangements of the Final Fantasy VII main theme used in the Grasslands, but also Swamp Romp and Hollow Skies for the Grasslands' 2 visually distinct sub-regions, the Marshes and the Midgar region. Luckily, Chapter 4 continues the trend of generous musical variety by giving the Junon region its own musically distinct theme in the shape of Yoshinori Nakamura's The Junon Region, Remnants of the Republic. Remnants of the Republic is an apt subtitle for this track, since everywhere you wander in the Junon region, you see the desolation wrought by Junon's war with Shinra. Dilapidated bunkers, smashed homes, cratered landscapes, the Junon region is perhaps the most decimated and depressing region in the entire game. Except, you wouldn't really know it listening to the music. This is a jaunty, driving piece that wouldn't feel out of place in the extended universe of Pirates of the Caribbean. And this is likely not an accident either. Beyond the ravages of war, the other thing you might pick up on while exploring the coastal Junon region is, they really like boats out here. Like, a lot. And not to jump too far ahead, but once the party reaches the town of Lore Junon, you can learn all about the Republic's swashbuckling piratey past. So as far as evoking Junon's naval past, I think the track nails the assignment. It's maybe a bit too on the piratey nose, if you ask me, but I see what they were going for. However, as far as evoking the feelings of loss and destruction that permeate the actual Junon region of today, it completely misses the mark. You are wandering through landscapes lifted right out of a World War II video game, yet the music is pushing you forward with the plundering spirit of Captain Jack Sparrow. It's a bit jarring just how easy it is to ignore or gloss over the tragedy in the region, and it's in large part because of the music. It's to the point where I wonder if the omission of tragedy in the music is actually intentional. Are the citizens of Junon so steeped in the mythos of their swashbuckling glory days that they live in denial of their massive defeat at the hands of Shinra? It might also explain why seemingly no concerted effort has been made to clean up the battlefield now decades after the war. Is the music clever commentary on Junon's myopic nostalgia for its mighty naval past? Or am I just giving this fairly one-note track a pass by justifying its narrow narrative scope? I'm not sure. Anyhow, this is our first confirmed Nakamura track, and while I am not in love with this track per se, I am a huge fan of his work in Remake, especially his unconventional arrangements of classic Uematsu tracks, such as his take on Tifa's theme, right on. But his original remake compositions were nothing to sneeze at either, such as the surprisingly perfect Leslie's theme, or even the better of the two Avalanche themes, if you ask me. You can spend a lot of time in the Junon region, so this is probably the longest airtime one of his tracks has gotten so far. And considering how important Junon and its surrounding region is, not just in Chapter 4 of Rebirth, but inevitably in Remake Part 3 as well, giving Junon its own theme was way overdue. Final Fantasy VII had a few Junon-adjacent pieces of music, such as Rufus's welcoming ceremony, and Shinra's full-scale assault. We'll get to both of those tracks in detail in the coming episodes, but even though they play in Junon, those are not really Junon tracks. They're Shinra tracks. So new, unique Junon themes are a welcome addition, and I expect we'll hear other, potentially less piratey sounding arrangements of this Junon theme in the years to come. The main melody in particular seems ripe for all sorts of rearrangements down the line. Also, I should clarify that you are currently listening to the version of the theme that plays when you first arrive in the Junon region. But just like with Chapter 2, once you activate a few Remnawave towers, the track arrangement changes. Most noticeably, we now have a new mandolin layer accompanying the whole track, which, frankly, is doing a fair bit of heavy lifting. The mandolin also works as a nice thematic tissue, connecting some of the instrumentation choices of Chapter 4 to Chapter 3's Follow the Black Robes and Chapter 2's Into the Mines. Paired with a flute, the mandolin helps carve out the Junon region's sound. Sonically unique enough to be more than just a pastiche of Pirates of the Caribbean, especially the lovely section near the end, right before the loop. Nice. Encountering an enemy causes the track to dynamically transition to its battle arrangement. I think this is a huge improvement over the field theme. There's a fast, strumming acoustic guitar and exciting percussion that further steers the ship away from Pirates territory. Occasional chugging electric guitars bring more oomph, and the outro I highlighted in the field version is equally expanded out, with strings somewhat lazily harmonizing the flute to great effect. Still not my favorite piece, but the urgency is certainly more palpable now, with even some echoes of the region's war-torn past. On our way to Junon proper, we stop in at the nearby Chocobo Ranch, which, were this any other video game with a responsible music budget, would cause Farm Boy, from Chapter 2's Chocobo Ranch, to start playing. But this isn't any other video game. This is Rebirth. So of course we arrive and are greeted with a new track. This is a super relaxed, bluegrassy rendition of the Chocobo theme, with a slide guitar as the lead, which, man, what a woefully underutilized instrument. And check out that awesome mega warbly organ in the mix while you're at it. Hallelujah! It fits the sort of haphazard, dilapidated look of the ranch and of the whole region itself. This track is pretty singular in its instrumentation choices, so guessing the identity of the arranger is a bit tricky. It's possible it's Nakamura as well, since the Cosmo Canyon region theme from Chapter 10 has a sort of similar instrumentation and style. Sorry, I try not to talk about tracks we haven't gotten to yet, but I had to make an exception this one time. Gabe, the owner of the ranch, tells you he's had all sorts of issues since his carriage broke down. It's on Cloud & Co. to track down his missing chocobo and then his missing carpenter. Southwest of the ranch, we stealthily make our way to and capture the missing chocobo, Belle. This is the Junon region's main chocobo theme. In Chapter 2, we talked about how that version's chocobo theme, arranged by Shotaro Shima, was a good snapshot of the jaunty sound of the grasslands. Similarly, this Junon region arrangement captures the harsher strings and brass of the Junon region's main theme. Not as majestic or cheerful as the grasslands, a touch militaristic, which all makes sense considering the state of the ruins you are riding through. But it's not just the music nor the color of the chocobos that make each region unique. The Junon chocobo has the ability to climb up walls. Wow! That is shockingly vertical. And it's especially useful since Gabe's carpenter is high up on a mountain, snoozing on the job. As we rise in elevation, the Junon region theme gets replaced by a new track. The geographically surprising mix of Peruvian pan flutes and an African kalimba? Now that's what I call some capital WM world music, baby. It's a lovely piece, very fitting of the more pensive setting atop the mountain. From here you can better see the damage done to Junon, both in the landscape below and also in the small stone monuments built upon the burial sites of those who didn't outlive the war. The first part of this chapter takes place at sunset, which gives the scene a fitting, melancholic glow. For my money, this is one of the more beautiful moments in all of Rebirth. But while this is a nice piece of music, my good friend pointed out it is maybe a little bit too similar to the Peruvian classic El Condor Pasa. Considering the name of that track, which translates to The Condor Passes, I wouldn't be surprised if this was an intentional reference point. Kinda neat either way though. This track isn't on the original soundtrack, so we're left guessing as to who the composer and arranger are. Nakamura is a logical pick, especially if you compare it to the Under Junon theme we're covering at the start of the next episode, but I won't spoil that one. Another possibility is Shingo Kataoka, whose Gongaga village music from Chapter 9 has a sort of similar instrumentation and style. Sorry, I try not to talk about tracks we haven't gotten to yet, but I had to make an exception this one time. That would be my second pick. Surprise, surprise, the carpenter tasks us with finding the missing parts of Gabe's carriage. Digging all of that stuff up and bringing it back to the ranch causes our lackadaisical bluegrassy chocobo track to morph into something much more optimistic and upbeat, reflecting the reversal of Gabe's fortunes. Thank you, Evan. The slide guitar's still in the mix, but fiddles and harmonicas are the new dueling leads. It's a fun track. That's 3 more versions of the Chocobo theme in Chapter 4, in case you felt like Rebirth didn't have enough of those already. And I hope you got your fill of the previous Chocobo track, because from this point on, this is the track that plays when you visit Gabe's ranch. While exploring the Junon region, we activated a few Remnawave towers, which caused Chadley to pick up on a new proto-relic signal. While I expected this to be a continuation of the trials and tribulations of Beck and his badasses, tracking the map pin instead leads you to a lonesome Fort Condor board game. And then, before you know it, the surviving members of Avalanche magically get transported, transmogrified into polygonally retrograded versions of their 1997 selves. Whoa. The coolness of this moment, however, is slightly offset by the fact that I now have to play more of the Fort Condor minigame. I don't know, maybe you loved it, but I wasn't a huge fan of this minigame in either Remake's Yuffie DLC nor in the original game. This time around though, the iconic hero units gives it a bit more flavor. The music, however, of which there is a surprising amount of, 6 tracks in fact, hasn't changed one bit since Remake. And because these are just remake tracks, I won't spend too much time on them individually. Overall, I could take or leave them. FF7's original Fort Condor theme was never my favorite to begin with. And Yoshitaka Suzuki's arrangements of the theme are for the most part fine, with a fair bit of gameplay-based triggers that keep the music surprisingly dynamic. The first track, simply called Fort Condor, has 2 discrete parts to it. There's the half-minute long intro that loops continuously in cutscenes and while you are selecting your party. But then, once you start the actual match, the track finishes out the bar and then jumps to the main gameplay theme, which is a more faithful version of the 1997 original. This division of sort of 2 tracks in one is similar to the Queen's Blood theme, which also vamps a softer intro while you are preparing your starting hand, waiting for the match to start before kicking in the main part of the piece. Also similar to Queen's Blood is how it dynamically adapts its instrumentation based on whether or not you are currently winning. Fort Condor's music has 3 more discrete sections that play based on how the match is going. There is a tug-of-war style balance to Fort Condor battles, which is reflected in the music. If you are close to the enemy's base, it plays something triumphant. If the enemy is closing in on you, the music becomes more dire, with the loss of morale reflected in the loss of rhythmic momentum. And if the timer starts running out, the music picks up the pace, becoming much more desperate. All told, it's a pretty rudimentary implementation of dynamic music, especially compared to Queen's Blood's subtle attenuation of the lead instrument, but on the flip side, this less subtle approach is likelier to be noticed and appreciated by a larger percentage of players. Lastly, there is a self-explanatory victory jingle, which is the second appearance of the original fanfare theme, although once again taken from Remake. Looks like we'll have to hold out a bit longer for an original Rebirth arrangement of the fanfare. This one's a good one though. Frankly, any arrangement of the fanfare that faithfully keeps that awesome synth line from the coda is guaranteed to be good. Fort Condor Defeat, on the other hand, is a bit more unique. The classic fanfare melody is gone, and the coda's cool synth line has been pitched down and shifted to a darker key. You can also make out echoes of the main Shinra motif, which is thematically appropriate, since historically, Shinra is at war with Fort Condor. There are 4 Fort Condor boards strewn across the Junon region. Once you've beaten all of them, you finally get your hand on the next piece of the proto-relic. Hooray! It does nothing. However, just like in the Grasslands region, Cloud's proximity to the proto-relic causes him to have a similar Gilgameshian vision. This is a second Japanese-inspired arrangement of Final Fantasy V's Battle on the Big Bridge. The arrangement is quite similar to the one in Chapter 2, to the point where that one could possibly be considered an intro to this newer one. But as a result of this cutscene being less of a tease, and in fact an introduction to Gilgamesh, the track 2 is able to cover most of the main passages from the original FF5 track. It's still missing the main verse melody, which I'm assuming they'll save for the next Proto-Relic quest resolution scene. This track is uncredited, but if I had to guess, I'd put my money on Shoya Tsunekawa being the track's arranger. Partially because the Japanese-inspired instrumentation doesn't sound anything like the Shotaro Shima, Yoshitaka Suzuki, Tadayoshi Makino, or Ryo Furukawa arrangements we've heard so far, but perhaps the bigger clue is that the last track of Disc 5 of the Rebirth original soundtrack is a blisteringly fast rocking version of Battle on the Big Bridge. Sorry, I try not to talk about tracks we haven't gotten to yet, but I had to make an exception this one time. I'm assuming that plays somewhere near the end of the multi-part Proto-Relic Gilgamesh quest, though I can't say for sure since in my first playthrough I rushed the back half of the game, skipping many of the side quests, all so I could finish it in time for the Rebirth Orchestra show in Toronto. I then missed the show because I misread the date on my ticket. so I rushed the game for nothing, and I am still peeved. Anyhow, that later track, which I'm still yet to hear in game, was arranged by Shoya Tsunekawa, so there is logic that this current Gilgamesh track would also be by him. It ain't proof, but it's the best lead we've got. With the Fort Condor quests wrapped up, we've now finished the bulk of the Junon region's open world assignments, at least in terms of new music. The setting sun has been ever so patiently waiting for us to get on with the story, so it's time to get our party to an inn before the day fully comes to a close. Luckily, I know just the place in Under Junon, but we'll have to save that for another time. And that's going to be it for our first foray in the Junon region. Personally, I think Chapter 4 has a bit of a shaky start in terms of music. Not quite as strong as the prior 3 chapters, but by next episode, the chapter really finds its footing. So I hope you'll join me again in the next episode. And speaking of prior episodes, in Chapter 3 I solicited advice about a couple mysterious melodies. The first one was during the conclusion of Elena's boss fight track, where I posited that while Tsung discusses the safety of Aerith, Ryo Furukawa plays the main 5-note melody of the Whispers theme. While I questioned its narrative inclusion, to me it felt pretty deliberate still. But several commenters pointed out that it could also be a piece of Barrett's theme. This is a strong theory, since Barrett is literally on screen for part of the section where the melody in question plays. There is also precedent for Barrett's theme in this piece, since what I do believe is his theme shows up about 45 seconds earlier. Here's the melody from the Elena piece, followed by the section of Barrett's theme in question. First in its 1997 incarnation, then when the same leitmotif showed up earlier in this track. Blue notes indicate the part where the sequence is the same as in the Elena track. Red notes indicate wrong notes, wrong in pitch, or simply when there shouldn't be one playing at that moment. Both Barrett examples, it hits on 4 out of the 5 notes from the Tsung sequence, but those correct notes are sandwiched by additional notes that muddy not just the melody in question, but the timing and rhythm of it. Keep in mind the Mystery Tsung melody is just 5 notes long, which, as we just saw, maps perfectly to the main Whispers motif. So I was still on Team Whispers at this point, until it was pointed out that Masashi Hamauzu, the composer of the Whispers theme, isn't credited on this track in the official soundtrack. The liner notes only list Ryo Furukawa and Nobuo Uematsu as the composers. And usually, Square Enix is pretty good when it comes to in-depth crediting of composers in their album liner notes. So the lack of Masashi Hamauzu credit on this track could be considered a smoking gun arm for Team Barrett. However, they aren't always perfect with their crediting, especially with subtle inclusions like this one. Allow me to present the track The Whispers Beckon from Chapter 9 of Rebirth. Sorry, I try not to talk about tracks we have. This track was arranged by Yoshitaka Suzuki, and as expected by a track with the word The Whispers in the title, it was composed by Masashi Hamauzu. Only by Hamauzu, if the Rebirth soundtrack liner notes are to be believed. But about 2 minutes into the track, it plays a bit of Nobuo Uematsu's Mako Reactor theme. not super subtle and clearly deliberate considering you are in a Mako reactor while this track plays. Yet still, Nobuo Uematsu's name was omitted. This is obviously just an oversight, but it's all to say that the credits aren't always great gospel, and so Hamauzu's exclusion from the Elena track credits doesn't foolproof eliminate the possibility that it could be the Whispers theme. So I don't know if I'm alone on this one, but I'm still firmly in the Team Whispers camp. But until we hear from Furukawa himself, it'll likely remain a mystery. The second Mithril Mine melody that left me scratching my head is the one that plays during the last cutscene of the chapter, when Barret and Red 13 catch up with Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith. Unlike the easy-to-miss Whispers/Barret melody that only played once, this one plays several times throughout the piece. It's the central melody. People left a few fun theories in the comments as to where the melody might come from, but the most popular choice was that it came from a specific section of Cosmo Canyon. Wow, y'all have very good ears for catching that. From a pitch standpoint, it's pretty darn close, with only the last two notes being different. Personally, I would chalk it up to a coincidence though, since I think it's missing too many of the surrounding notes from the actual Cosmo Canyon passage to be considered an intentional callback to that pre-existing motif. But I could easily be wrong. There was also another theory in the comments that I thought was equally cool. The user GamerThronic, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, hit me with this idea. The idea is that it's a new resolution to the central call and response melody from In Search of the Man in Black. If you need a reminder, here's what the call and response sounds like in Shotaro Shima's main Rebirth version of the track. Think of these two musically connected but separate phrases as having a conversation with one another. The first one is posed like a question. Are we going to get out of these mines? The response plays off the notes of the first to give an answer. In this case, it's a pretty ominous and inconclusive answer. This is the primary tone, or conversation, if you will, of the party's experience in the mine. But once Barret and Red catch up with the party, with two big bosses behind them, that same question has a new, more optimistic answer. The new answer melody fits beautifully with the opening question, which in non-musical terms simply means the new melody is a comfortable, natural-sounding resolution to the question melody. We have a new, happier answer. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It also gives extra credence to Shima's tracks in Chapter 3 functioning as a consistent, cohesive musical suite, with this last piece functioning as the outro of a musical idea that first began at the end of Chapter 2 with Into the Mine. Very cool. Or at the very least, a very cool theory by GamerThronic. Whether the truth is this one, the Cosmo Canyon theory, or something else altogether, it's fun to see such a brief musical idea spur some cool discussions. I'm very grateful to the comments section in moments like these. Alright, that's it for today. Sorry for the wait on this one. The next one should be out much sooner. Stick around for that. I promise you there are some damn good ones there. Okay, take care.